Welcome to Healing Oasis. It's May 5th, 2014, and we're here at the studio at Healing Oasis talking about healing and Hilo on the healing island of Hawaii. I'm Reverend Doctor Glen Swartwout, and this is our first podcast. It's a test. We couldn't get hooked up online, so we're recording it on the computer. But things that are worth doing badly. It's an old saying. It's still a good one. So welcome to the podcast. The Daily Apple, maybe. We're not sure what the name's going to be yet, but we'll know soon. And today I was reading a very interesting article that was pointing out that in 2010, research was done that confirmed that light, photons, can become a Bose-Einstein Condensate. Now, a Bose-Einstein Condensate was proposed a state of matter, not solid, liquid, or gas, not a plasma, a whole other form, state of matter. This condensate form was proposed by two physicists, Einstein and Bose, and in 2001, the Nobel Prize was awarded for the research that showed from the 1990s that condensates in fact do exist. In the laboratory to produce them and study them and measure them, observe them, they required very low temperatures, close to 0 degrees Kelvin. Interesting point about Bose-Einstein condensates of light, of photons. The research in 2010, they found that they could produce these at room temperature, meaning also at body temperature. So biological systems can, if they're able to produce similar causal conditions, arrange the conditions, can resonate light energy indefinitely, because a condensate is a superconducting, superfluid state of matter, or in this case energy. An interesting thing they found with the photons of light in the condensate state is that they have mass. Now, photons are said not to have resting mass. Very interesting. But they showed that they do have mass as a Bose-Einstein condensate. How did they get them to form that state? Well, they had two mirrors very, very close together, and they could get the photon in there, and it would just stay. It's like an infinite hall of mirrors, and the photon's going back and forth. Kind of like a laser before it lasers. So the new information, 2014, just released, is that a theoretical model that supports that laboratory finding of 4 years ago has now been produced. And so we have both the actual proof that Bose-Einstein condensates of light exist, and an understanding mathematically of how and why that, of a model of how that can be. So in a biological system, one of the ways that this can happen is if we have layers. If we have layers that are able to resonate back and forth in a reflective way, if we have a similar state and then we have a change in state, where that change exists, kind of imagine the surface of water and there's air above the water, we can have total internal reflection of light when we're underwater, so that we can see out of the water in some angles, but other angles where there's total internal reflection, all light just stays inside, we can't see through. So in the water in the biological system, we know that it exists in layers, and so where the last layer exists, and then there's maybe bulk water that contains protons, would have a high concentration of protons in that bulk water at the edge of the structured water in the biological system. It's actually not even water in the sense of H2O. It's where the protons are concentrated outside the structured water. It's primarily hydronium. There's a lot of hydrogen ions there. Within the structure, it's a hexagonal sheet arrangement of hydrogen and oxygen, really a different molecule entirely from water, but we'll still consider it water. I would call it a liquid crystal state of water. It's the state that water goes into in between liquid and solid. So when ice is forming, there's always a layer of this liquid crystal water on the surface and a sheet. And when it freezes, it expands. It expands to a certain position directly above the sheet that was already frozen, where in the liquid crystal water, the sheets are offset. Same sheets, but offset in the liquid crystal, directly aligned vertically in ice. So another interesting feature of this liquid crystal water that we're primarily made of when we're healthy, as opposed to dirty bulk water when we're not healthy, is that it stores a very high amount of photonic energy. In fact, it forms by absorbing both ultraviolet and infrared energy from the environment, especially the infrared, especially the near infrared is where the peak absorption is located. So when the body produces heat, such as in a fever, producing more heat than normal, or if you happen to be a reptile listening in and you want to sit on a rock in the sun, you're absorbing that sunlight and the heat, and it's actually being absorbed and utilized by storing as like a battery storage in the structuring of the water in the biological system. The more energy there is in that storage, the larger are those zones called coherence zones of structured water. Now, a coherence zone is exactly what I would envision producing in order to resonate a Bose-Einstein condensate of light, or in fact of the spirit minerals, of the transition minerals, transition elements, the gold, platinum, palladium group that makes up the spirit body in our theory of everything, or clinical theory of everything. I call it a clinical theory of everything because it's derived primarily from clinical application, and it's used primarily in clinical application. That means in the real world, frontline, with living beings and consciousness and healing and disease and that sort of thing, as opposed to most theories of everything which have difficulty dealing with more than one or two objects in the universe. So that makes the clinical theory of everything a very useful model. So we will continue on in the next podcast. I hope you'll join us. Aloha.